Andor versus The Acolyte, the best and the worst that Star Wars TV has to offer. There is a simple reason why one is a masterpiece and the other is cancelled, why one is great and the other sucks, why one succeeded and the other failed. This is something that I haven't seen anybody talk about and why I had to make this video. That's why in this video, we will briefly explore the history of Star Wars and how it became one of the biggest franchises in cinema, break down the simple reason why The Acolyte failed, and explore why Andor was so much better. Welcome to Donnie's TV, a cyber nerd's paradise, and a channel dedicated to all things sci-fi, fantasy, and cinema. If you like in-depth breakdowns about your favorite shows, I've spent the past week scouring through old interviews, analyzing how a film about guys waving around laser swords changed the world, doing research, and making this video just for you. So sit back, relax, and let's take a trip down memory lane. A long time ago, in a land far, far away, in 1977.
Carter made the decision, evidently, just 3 weeks before the inauguration, that he would walk after his inauguration back to the White House.
The fact that people like you and me and others that I've talked with who say, well, I don't like sci-fi, I don't like that sort of thing.
But I like this.
I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
Why do we like this?
Luke Skywalker, known in real life as Mark Hamill.
College in the theater arts department for 2 years, and I finally figured out about 148 credits before doing a feature film.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fantasy. It's not science fiction so much as it is space fantasy. And it's about people. It's finally about people and not finally about science.
There lived a man named George Lucas, who created a world that would forever alter the course of sci-fi and pop culture. This world, of course, was Star Wars. And the first Star Wars film was released in 1977, titled Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. And the rest is history.
I wield great power, Jedi fool.
That power will only consume you.
Attack!
Over 40 years later, and the Star Wars franchise is the second largest in cinematic history, bigger than James Bond, Spider-Man, Harry Potter, and the Fast and Furious franchise. Eclipsed only in sales by Marvel, the franchise has produced 15 films, multiple TV shows, video games, and even animated shows as well. But that's not all. The film in and of itself has become a landmark in pop culture.
Wow, what an ending! Who'd have thought Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father?
Thank you.
No stranger than when Darth Vader was a meter maid.
The Force is strong with you. Tell me your secret, Timmy Turner.
I'll never tell you my secret!
Whether you like Star Wars or not, everyone has heard the phrase, "May the Force be with you." And everyone knows what a lightsaber is, especially if you're American. As a whole, the franchise has grossed over $10 billion, and as I said before, has the second largest fan base in the world. So how come in recent years, it seems as though Star Wars can do nothing right? The recent trilogy, which continues the main story, has been hit with harsh reviews. Most of the TV shows haven't done well, and overall it seems that even the OG Star Wars fans are tired of the franchise. Is a franchise as Star Wars too big to fail? Or is it finally time for its final demise? How can a franchise with such a large audience and with that much history drop the ball? How do you mess that up? Well, one of the main culprits of the recent decline in Star Wars is this lady right here, Kathleen Kennedy, the current acting president of Star Wars. Hopefully not for long. Apparently, Kathleen has been in Hollywood for a long time and is highly successful. So I don't know why none of that success has made its way into Star Wars, but I could think of a couple reasons. Mainly, the shows she has approved of and put out. One of them being the reason you clicked on this video, the Acolyte. Now there are 101 reasons why the Acolyte got cancelled and why it didn't do well. And there have been many videos created about how bad the story is, the marketing of the show, and just the show in general. But there is one very obvious fact that I haven't heard anyone speak about. It is the simple reason why the Acolyte did so badly in my opinion, or at least it's the main reason. Funny enough, it has nothing to do with the actual show, and when you hear it, you'll understand that the Acolyte in a lot of ways was doomed to fail before it even came out. Star Wars, as I've said many times, has the second biggest fan base in history. But if we're being honest, Marvel only took over Hollywood in the late 2010s. So before Marvel's recent explosion in popularity, Star Wars was the top dog. Now it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this huge fan base that Star Wars has is made up of a very specific demographic. Men. Mainly American men, I would assume. Girls don't like Star Wars. I'm not saying all girls, but I am saying most of them. If you were to ask 10 females right now if they love Star Wars, whether it's your mother, your sister, your girlfriend, your side chick, I'm sure you will be met with the same answers 95% of the time. Either she'll say no, or she'll say, what's Star Wars? So it's safe to assume that the large Star Wars fan base, at least 90% of it, is male. Great. Now, of that male section of the fan base, I'm sure it's also safe to assume that the majority of the men who love Star Wars are white and straight. There are definitely minorities who love Star Wars, but the majority of the fan base, and I mean at least 80% of it, is made up of straight white dudes, white boys. And not these types of white boys, these types of white boys. Nerdy, weird, normal dudes who love to spend their free time watching the movies and shows on TV, probably have a collection of merch or toys lying around somewhere. So when Kathleen Kennedy comes in wearing a shirt that says the Force is female, when the Acolyte is marketed as the gayest Star Wars show,
I want to ask you both because this is, I would say, arguably the gayest Star Wars, I think by a considerable margin.
And are you telling me, with a straight face, that C-3PO is straight?
Or outward.
I think it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian.
and when the cast of the show blatantly show that they know nothing about the Star Wars universe,
look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people. Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
It's not surprising that nobody watches it. It's like you alienated the vast majority of your fan base, straight up told them that your new product is not for them, and then you were surprised when they either didn't like it or just straight up didn't consume it. That's like owning a shoe store that mainly sells basketball shoes for men and telling your customers that, look, our next product isn't going to be shoes, it's going to be sandals. Since you have such a loyal customer base, they're like, okay, weird, but fine, we'll still buy them. And then you're like, no, these sandals aren't for you guys, they're for women. Inevitably, when you don't sell 80% of your inventory, you then complain to your customers like, why didn't you buy our sandals? And then they look at you like, well, you didn't make them for us, so what must we do? As I said before, girls don't like Star Wars, bro. And it's not because Star Wars isn't inclusive towards females. No, it's because Star Wars is nerdy. Think about it. It's a bunch of people and aliens running around in cloaks, waving laser swords and fighting against stormtroopers. What about that is appealing to the average female? Sure, there are definitely some amazing women who love Star Wars, but most of them couldn't care less. So when you make a show targeted at females and gay people and non-white people, you alienate the vast majority of your audience, and thus statistically, the show does bad. It's simple math and common sense. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. And when it comes to Star Wars, yes, there are many different demographics that make up the fan base. But when it comes to the people who know the lore, who buy merchandise, who book seats for the new movies a week before they come out, and who watch YouTube breakdown videos like this one, most of them are straight white dudes. By the way, speaking of YouTube video breakdowns like this one, if you're enjoying the video so far, please click the like button. And if you want to see more videos about sci-fi, fantasy, and cinema, please subscribe. I think that when it comes to the world of fantasy and sci-fi in general, it hasn't felt like a safe space always for people of color. Amandla Steenberg. Now, I could never stay mad at Amandla because but she's just straight up wrong here. I don't really like speaking about politics that much, so I'll keep this brief. But lately, some Star Wars media people have been trying to paint the picture that sci-fi spaces aren't for Latin people, black people, Indian and Asian people. Basically that sci-fi is only made for white people. I won't say what race I am because it's not important, but I'm not white. And speaking as someone who isn't white and has always felt like he didn't belong no matter where he was, sci-fi and fantasy spaces have always been a safe space for me, especially as a child. Growing up, when you're different, it can really affect you. But when you turn on that TV or that laptop screen, you can escape to Coruscant, Tatooine, and Naboo, and all of your problems can just wash away for those 2 hours. Star Wars, among other franchises for me, have always been a safe place, where I felt included. And to see people who clearly don't care about the world of Star Wars, who don't know what a kyber crystal is, or what midichlorians are, who don't know of the rainy climates of Kamino, or the harsh heat of Tatooine, who don't even know that Anakin did not blow up the Death Star.
Look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people. Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
To see people like that make their own statements about the franchise I love when they are clearly not informed on the franchise at all is pretty disheartening. They don't represent us. And when I say us, I'm referring to the sci-fi nerds and geeks across the world. To us, franchises like Star Wars are sacred and shouldn't be used as tools to peddle certain agendas. I will say this though, there aren't that many non-white people in Star Wars, and the franchise has failed in terms of representation. It would be cool to see more Indian, Asian, and other races and demographics within the show. But I don't like it when they make it about that. Make a great show which just so happens to have more black or Hispanic people, instead of making a show with a bunch of black and Hispanic people and forcing us to like it because it has more diversity. Either way you slice it, the focus should be on the shows themselves and not the political agendas of their creators. But to top it all off, I know I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but Star Wars low-key doesn't even have that many white people in it either. Just look at this picture of the Jedi Council. How many Caucasians do you see? It's sci-fi, man. At the end of the day, it's just a bunch of aliens. I mean, one of my favorite Jedi growing up was Kit Fisto, and he's green, and of the Nautilus species. The final reason why the Acolyte didn't work is because of the show itself. The marketing of the show definitely turned a lot of the fan base off, the various political agendas as well, but ultimately none of that would have prevented me from at least watching it and giving it a chance. When I did, I realized that it kinda sucks.
Why aren't you a Jedi, Osha?
Because I failed!
Now, in my opinion, I don't actually think the show was that bad. I mean, the first 3 episodes were trash.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
But after that, it picks up and becomes an okay experience.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
I will say this though. As someone who's had sleeping problems my entire life, whenever I would watch The Acolyte, it was like the show was injecting melatonin straight into my bloodstream. I mean, I was out every time I would watch it.
Babies don't sleep this well.
It got to the point where when season 1 ended, I was a little sad because watching it before bed had become an integral part of my sleeping routine. So did it help me sleep? Yes, but did I think it was as bad as people say? Not really. Apparently when the creator of the show, Leslie Headland, was creating it, she based it off of a fan fiction that she wrote back in the day. And that made a lot of sense to me because this really wasn't written for a Star Wars audience. When I turn on Star Wars, I want to see duels, gunfights, dramatic speeches about philosophy, incredible character arcs, and a couple of witty one-liners here and there. I don't want to see some weird love-hate relationship with the student and her master where he's bathing naked in a lake and she's watching him and then she tries to kill him, but there's also this weird sexual tension between them. Like, this is Star Wars, bro. This ain't Twilight. Stop with the teen drama stuff. That's not what we're here for. The crazy thing is, in an interview, Leslie said that she wanted to explore the origin of the Sith and introduce them to the Star Wars audience, which is insane to me, because I thought the Sith was supposed to be scary, not sexy. If she knew better, she'd know that practicing the way of the dark side has a pretty nasty effect on the skin and the way you look. Just ask Darth Sidious. Anyway, as I said before, when I watch Star Wars, I want to see gunfights, speeches on philosophy, great character arcs, and different worlds. The Acolyte had none of these things. But do you know what had all of them? The surprising masterpiece of the Star Wars discography, Andor. One of my biggest critiques of Star Wars as a whole is that the big movies have basically been telling the same story. The galaxy is heavily ruled by the light or dark side. A chosen one is born to change the Force forever. This chosen one goes rogue and sends the world into darkness. And then another chosen one, who is somehow related or linked to the first chosen one, defeats them. And so the cycle repeats itself. If you look at all the movies, they've basically told you that same story 3 times. One of my other pet peeves with Star Wars was the fact that they never really fully explored all the different aspects of the world that George Lucas created. It focuses solely on the Jedi, and to be honest, it focuses on the Chosen One only, when there is so much more to the Jedi Order, the Sith, and the galaxy as a whole. Most of the movies take place on the same planets: Tatooine, Coruscant, Naboo, Hoth, and Mustafar, among others. But when you watch shows like Star Wars The Clone Wars, you begin to get a sense for just how large the Star Wars universe is, and how much there is to explore outside of the Jedi Order. Star Wars desperately needed something that felt a little bit more real, more grounded and more practical. Something that would focus on telling a real story, that almost didn't feel like something that would come out of a Star Wars film. Enter Andor. Andor for me was exactly what I've always wanted from Star Wars. It's like they heard what I've been saying and responded. A slow burn that starts out feeling more like a sci-fi thriller than a Star Wars movie, and escalates into a beautiful composition of rebellion, character development, betrayal, and the ability to persevere through absolute hopelessness. To start off, let's explore how Andor succeeded where the Acolyte failed. For starters, there were no political marketing campaigns pushing certain agendas on the fanbase. If I'm being honest, I ended up watching Andor by accident. In addition, the Acolyte had a very diverse cast, and pushed it as the main reason why we should all love it. By contrast, Andor had an all-white... Wait. No. Andor is a story about a character who is played by Diego Luna, a Mexican man, and his main love interest is played by an actress who is a Latina? No! But the Acolyte failed because Star Wars fans only like white people to be the main characters. So how can the most popular show on Star Wars be about a Mexican man? Well then, maybe, just maybe, if you make a good show or a great movie, we won't care about how diverse the cast is. Just some food for thought. Anyway, the main reason why Andor succeeded and the Acolyte didn't boils down to one thing as always: the quality of the art. Honestly, Andor is so good that there were moments that I forgot it was even in the Star Wars universe. It starts off as a show that feels more like a crime thriller than a sci-fi movie. To be real, if there weren't stormtroopers and laser guns, one might even forget that it was a Star Wars picture at all. In terms of being better than the Acolyte, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the first 10 minutes of Andor are better than the entire Acolyte series. A man goes into a brothel whilst being on a planet that he has no jurisdiction to be on. He gets harassed a little by some local security guards but brushes them off. He then questions the owner about one of the girls. He is looking for a sister who is from a planet that was colonized by the Empire. The owner tells him that the girl no longer works there and that he should leave if he wants to be safe. After leaving, he is then harassed by those same security guards and pretends to bribe them. After one reaches for his pocket, he proceeds to fight them. He accidentally kills one and is forced to make a horrible choice. Does he leave the other one and hope for the best, or does he kill him, which would make him a murderer of 2 Empire security members? He chooses the second option and runs away from the planet, escaping on a ship and trying to do everything to cover his tracks. Now, does that sound like the intro to one of your favorite crime thrillers or what? I think my 2 favorite parts about Andor was the psychological design of the prison and the resolve of Luthen. The prison was designed in a way where inmates had no privacy at all and were forced to work all day every day. Your room was completely open for all to see, and you were given special benefits for being compliant and for working hard in the shop. The prison was basically utilized as a factory where prisoners were treated as slaves and were forced to build weapons for the Empire. The crazy part is that the prison had well over 100 prisoners, but only a couple dozen guards. But due to the way that it was designed, prisoners were psychologically made to feel as though they had no chance of escape. Honestly, I could talk about that prison and about Andor for an entire video, and if you would like that, please comment down below. But to end off, my current favorite part of the show is the monologue Luthen gives when he's blackmailing an Empire official and is asked, "Well, what do you sacrifice?"
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm. Kindness, kinship. Love.
The subtle facial expressions that Luthen gives, the hopelessness in his eyes, the acceptance of the fact that he knows he is fighting a battle he cannot hope to win.
I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts.
But his doing so anyway summarizes the beauty of Andor in its entirety.
Sort of the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Thank you for watching. I had a really great time making this video. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe, and Happy New Year. I'm wishing you the best in 2025.